Welcome to What If Lab. What if China invades Taiwan? How would the lives of Taiwanese people change? Imagine you're standing on the observation deck of Taipei 101, overlooking this vibrant city. People wander through night markets. Youngsters play music on the streets. Families laugh and chat in restaurants. This is Taiwan, a lively and free democratic society. But one day, everything changed. The island was invaded by China. Whether through force or other means, Taiwan lost its original freedom. If China invades Taiwan, the first casualty would be Taiwan's existing democratic system and civil liberties. According to the Hudson Institute, Beijing cannot tolerate Taiwan maintaining its democratic system, as this not only challenges the Chinese Communist Party's legitimacy over China, but may also inspire domestic calls for democratic reform. Following invasion, China would likely replicate its approach in Hong Kong, implementing strict legal restrictions and political repression. The implementation of the national security law severely crippled Hong Kong's pro-democracy movements, and Taiwan would likely face even harsher control. The Center for Strategic and International Studies (CSIS) indicates that China might enact the anti-secession law or a new national security law to completely ban opposition activities and speech. According to the diplomat, Taiwan's election system would either be modified or entirely abolished, with political parties subjected to strict scrutiny. Only those loyal to Beijing would have a chance to exist. This change would result in the loss of the Taiwanese people's right to vote, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and freedom of assembly. Meanwhile, all opposing voices would be labeled as endangering national security and severely punished. Under China's invasion, Taiwan would quickly face high-tech surveillance and political control from Beijing. A Harvard study points out that China has already developed a highly integrated surveillance system, combining artificial intelligence, facial recognition, and digital censorship to maintain stability and control information. If Taiwan becomes part of China, these systems will be swiftly introduced to Taiwanese society, like the re-education camps established in Xinjiang. Beijing's government has shown no mercy toward potential resistance. Many experts believe that Beijing would establish similar ideological transformation centers in Taiwan to eliminate the separatist ideology of the Taiwanese people. CSIS's analysis also suggests that Beijing would likely deploy large-scale digital surveillance and public security systems across Taiwan, from smartphone apps to public surveillance networks. Any behavior or speech that doesn't meet official standards could lead to arrest and punishment. This means that the personal privacy and basic freedoms of the Taiwanese people would be completely stripped away. China's invasion of Taiwan would not only be a political subversion, but would also cause catastrophic damage to Taiwan's economy. Taiwan's economy heavily relies on the international market, with the most critical sector being the semiconductor industry. According to the global semiconductor market research firm SEMI, Taiwan accounts for 65% of the world's semiconductor chip production and controls 90% of the most advanced chips below 10 nanometers worldwide. If invasion occurs, countries like the United States, Japan, and Europe will see Taiwan's semiconductor technology falling into China's hands as a major threat to global security. A study by Harvard Kennedy School indicates that to prevent technology leakage, Western nations may take drastic measures, including imposing severe embargoes and technology blockades on Taiwanese semiconductor companies. Worse still, the CSIS warns that invasion would trigger massive global market disruptions and supply chain restructuring. The collapse of the semiconductor supply chain alone could result in an economic loss of up to $1.6 trillion per year. Meanwhile, Taiwanese businesses would face severe operating difficulties. The withdrawal of foreign companies and the fleeing of international capital would result in massive unemployment and economic recession. Taiwan may quickly fall from a global technological hub to an economically marginalized entity. But the impact of this invasion would not be limited to politics and economics. It would penetrate deep into Taiwan's culture and education systems, attempting to fundamentally change the Taiwanese identity. According to research by the London School of Economics, Beijing would drastically reform Taiwan's education system to eliminate so-called separatist ideology. This means history textbooks would be rewritten to emphasize the narrative that Taiwan has always been part of China, while completely excluding Taiwanese indigenous historical perspectives. Education experts suggest that such policies would mimic those implemented in Hong Kong from primary school to university. Students would be indoctrinated with the ideology of the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation and required to pledge loyalty to the Communist Party. But it wouldn't stop at schools. In popular culture, Taiwanese music, films, and even linguistic expressions would likely face suppression. The Global Taiwan Institute suggests that Beijing might push for a cultural sinicization policy, forcing Taiwan's cultural industries to comply with Chinese censorship standards. Under such authoritarian rule, Taiwan's native languages and cultural expressions would be greatly restricted, and the Taiwanese people's sense of identity would face tremendous challenges. The consequences of a Chinese invasion of Taiwan would extend far beyond the island itself. It would restructure global supply chains and trigger a new wave of international confrontations. CSIS points out that the collapse of the global semiconductor supply chain would have disastrous effects on industries such as electronics, automobiles, and medical equipment. Countries around the world would rush to establish their own technological production lines and supply chain systems to protect themselves. The European Union's report also warns that if Taiwan's semiconductor production capacity falls under Chinese control, it could lead to a global economic divide, one side consisting of democratic, technological systems led by the United States, Japan, and Europe, and the other a totalitarian economic bloc centered around China and its allies. This conflict is not only economic but also involves geopolitical rebalancing. If China successfully gains control over Taiwan, its naval and air force power would extend into the Western Pacific, posing a major threat to the security of the United States and Japan. So, what choices would the Taiwanese people have in such a scenario? History tells us that in the face of authoritarian rule, people always find ways to resist. In a 2023 report by the Global Taiwan Institute, it's noted that if China invades Taiwan by force or other means, large-scale social resistance would be almost inevitable. This could manifest as widespread civil disobedience, the formation of underground organizations, and even armed resistance. The RAND Corporation's analysis emphasizes that Taiwan's younger generation highly values their local identity. Under authoritarian rule, this identity could transform into a strong will to resist. Referring to Hong Kong's example, underground resistance organizations, anonymous online activism, and international appeals could become the primary means of resistance. However, such resistance would come at a high price. According to the London School of Economics, China's crackdown on dissent is ruthless and unyielding. Taiwanese resistors could face severe punishments, including arrest, interrogation, and even secret executions. For many, perhaps the only option would be to flee. According to the Council on Foreign Relations, unification could result in a massive wave of refugees and a brain drain, potentially creating a new international refugee crisis. So, what will happen? This invasion would be one of the most controversial and destructive events in modern history. Taiwanese people would lose their cherished democracy and freedom. Political repression, economic collapse, international sanctions, and the complete reshaping of culture and education. These changes would fundamentally alter Taiwanese society. Internationally, The collapse of global supply chains would bring catastrophic consequences. The destruction of the semiconductor industry, escalating conflicts between Western nations and China, and the rise of a new, technological Cold War would all contribute to a radical reorganization of the global order. As the Hudson Institute states, this invasion would become the front line of the struggle between the free, democratic camp and authoritarianism. CSIS also warns Taiwan's fate will determine the global security, structure, and economic stability for decades to come. Such a destabilization will not only affect Taiwan but also the entire world. Thank you for joining this What If journey. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts. But before you go, let me get a little personal here. You see, the democracy and freedom that Taiwanese people enjoy, it's incredibly precious. Taiwan is a place that really values equality and being inclusive, especially when it comes to gender and identity. Those are some pretty amazing values, don't you think? Sure, Taiwan isn't perfect. High housing prices. Yeah, that's a pain. But even with those challenges, it's still a beautiful and vibrant island with a spirit worth cherishing. Now, here's the big question. If China actually changes the way Taiwanese people live, what would life be like? What would happen to those precious values of freedom, equality, and inclusivity? What do you think would happen if China invades Taiwan? Let me know in the comments below. And until next time, stay curious and keep questioning the world around you.